What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Counterpunch podcast. And today we will be deciding what is the greatest UFC knockout of all time. If you're new to these, my name is Lucas Cohen. His name, Rohan Borges. And the reason we're doing this video is, one, there's no UFC, but two, we just saw one of the greatest knockouts of all time this past Saturday at UFC 300 when Max Blessed Holloway put Justin Gaethje's lights out with 1 second left in the fight. So I think this is a good discussion to have. We won't be doing any full card breakdowns, but instead we're going to be releasing a bunch of YouTube content, and this will be the first video of the week. What is the greatest knockout of all time in UFC history? Rohan, before we get into it, what did we fucking see on Saturday?
I mean,
and don't spoil too much because we're going to get into it.
We're going to get into it, but I just have to recount what went down on Saturday because I'm still buzzing and I just still can't quite believe what I saw because, I mean, we had a bunch of people over. That last 10 seconds of the fight, that might have been the most hype moment I've ever had in my life as a UFC fan. And I'm saying that as somebody who's, over the past freaking 4 or 5 years, how many crazy moments have there been in the octagon? I don't think that shit can be topped, bro. I don't even know what to say about it. Max Holloway is a different breed. I think that's all I can say.
Well, don't talk too much about the knockout because let's get into our list. We're going to be doing our top 5 favorite knockouts, or what are the top 5 just best knockouts in UFC history. And at the end, we'll list some honorable mentions. But I think we can start at number 5, and I will begin at number 5. I'm going to start with the knockout we saw this past Saturday, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. The reason I don't put it at 1 or 2 is because there wasn't, of course, the moment was absolutely incredible. And the fact that, they were going to war, Holloway, met him in the center when he was already up 3-1, arguably 4-0, and just slumps him after a barrage of punches from both fighters. It was incredible. But the reason I don't put it at 1 and 2 is because, it didn't have the style, I'd say. Like, it wasn't like a fancy kick or like a crazy sort of strike that ended the fight. But regardless, I had to include this in the top 5. It might be the greatest UFC moment of all time. I feel like it's top 2 or 3 for that, 100%. But again, it had to make my top 5 list at the very least because, man, it was incredible what we saw on Saturday. So Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje on my list is number 5 for the greatest knockout of all time. What do you have?
That is interesting. I would have at least thought it would be top 3 of yours, but now that you're breaking it down, I guess it didn't have that stylistic factor that a lot of them do, especially the cleaner ones that you can think of. But man, for me on my list, again, this is all preference, let's just say that. But
of course,
I think magnitude matters and factors in a lot more on my list, maybe. And at 5, this might, surprise some of you, but Yair Rodriguez versus the Korean Zombie. That knockout, last second of the fight, just like we saw this past weekend, I was getting flashbacks because I'm like, this is literally the exact same situation. 4:59 on the clock. He was losing that fight, Lucas. He was losing that fight, audience. That is insane to think about because Korean Zombie is known for his durability. He stood in the center of the cage with nothing really to gain from charging at Yair Rodriguez, and he hits him with an up elbow with his head tucked. One of the cleanest techniques, and I guess that does have the stylistic factor like you're talking about. One of the cleanest strikes I've ever seen, and if you count the fact that it was in the last second of a fight that he was going to lose, I just think that has to make my list. So it is my number 5, Yair Rodriguez knocking out the Zombie.
How the fuck did you know that was going to be my number 4?
Oh, shit.
My number 4 knockout of all time
Bruh.
is Yair Rodriguez versus the Korean Zombie. And in my opinion, you have to put that above the Holloway. He was down in the fight. Not only that, he hits him with an up elbow.
Yeah, bro.
When have we ever seen that?
We still
as a
haven't
finishing
seen
strike
that.
ever?
I haven't
we
seen
rarely
that
see
thrown.
that.
Exactly.
We rarely see that being thrown,
bro.
And he finishes the fight with an up elbow, down 3-1. I have to put that as my number 4 best knockout of all time. I mean, yes, magnitude matters, and I guess that's why you say Holloway had the better knockout in comparison to the Korean Zombie one. But again, the style of the knockout was absolutely insane. Flatlined him just like Holloway did.
Yeah.
But, I mean, man, up elbow. I had to include that. Again, 1 second left in the fight. Another one that's guaranteed top 5. I'm going to have it as my number 4 of the top 5 greatest knockouts of all time. What is your number 4?
My number 4, Conor McGregor sleeping Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. Now, this could have been higher, and I was actually debating whether to put this in the top 3 and knock one of those out. But I couldn't do it just because how quick it happened. But the reason I have to put it on this list is because that, I think, ignited the superstar that we know Conor McGregor is today. He doesn't have that same superstar factor if that knockout never takes place. I mean, the build up to that fight, that was one of the craziest. Like, obviously now we've seen so many rivalries over the year that people can kind of forget about that one. But dude, Aldo hated McGregor. He hated his guts, man. And the build up to that fight, I mean, McGregor stealing his belt at the press conference, all the lead up to that, for that to be the result and to McGregor to come out on top like that. And that wasn't the fight he won 2 belts, because he beat Eddie Alvarez for the second one, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But to become champ, I mean, that was a huge moment for the UFC. I think that's why it has to be on this list, because what that meant for the UFC and the pull of the UFC, I think it meant a lot. So I had to include that.
See, the reason I wouldn't include a knockout like that on my list is just, yes, it happened in 13 seconds. Yes, it made, the biggest star in combat sports history. But I just like he hit him with a straight left.
Yeah,
like,
I know. I get that.
Other,
but man,
in my opinion, there's so many more knockouts when it comes to style. Just had my jaw dropped, and I'll get into that for number 3. A lot of people call this the greatest knockout of all time. I don't have it there, but it's definitely top 3 in my opinion. Edson Barboza versus Terry Edom. I mean, there have been, in comparison, the Yair up elbow, there have been a fair amount of spinning back kick finishes. But this one with Edson Barboza was so fucking clean. Like, he just took his top off and, landed just clean on his feet, man. Absolutely beautiful. Put Terry Edom stiff out cold. Again, a lot of people call this one the greatest knockout of all time. I'm going to have it at number 3 because I do think that there are 2 100% better than it, in my opinion. Of course, I respect anybody else's. But, man, the way Edson Barboza just put that man out stiff and made it look effortless with a spinning wheel kick. Had to make my top 3. What is your number 3?
My number 3, you might get a little mad at me for this. Joaquin Buckley. Spinning back kick in the air. I mean, with his leg caught on Impa Kasanga, and I also put him out stiff. Bro, I get that. I mean, the way that Lucas is doing his list, I know that this is going to be up there for you. But because it happened on the prelims, and I mean, it was my introduction to Joaquin Buckley, to be quite honest with you. I mean, obviously, I knew a little bit about him when he fought Kevin Holland, but I didn't really think he had that in him. And I mean, that knockout, I think if you're, again, factoring in the stylistic factor, it's probably the best knockout technique that we've ever seen. But the reason I have it at 3 is just because the magnitude wasn't quite what, these other ones are. Like, for me, that matters. I know. It's preference. But for me, I just, like, there's the top 2. The magnitude of those knockouts just eclipses that of the Buckley Impa one. But again, I will concede the fact that if you're talking about just the strike itself, the technique that was thrown to knock their opponent out, that's probably the best I've ever seen. Because, I mean, he had his leg caught. We've never seen that. I haven't seen that happen since. And we see that situation all the time where a fighter gets their leg caught, but usually they're just looking to, pull the clinch down, get back to their stance. But Buckley, I mean, made the most of that in an incredible way. So, yeah, I mean, that's got to be on this list. I know it's on your list, but I had to put it at 3. I know that'll make you a little tight.
Well, I don't want to get into too much. I'll get into it in a little bit. But let's move on to what is my number 2 greatest UFC knockout of all time. And in my opinion, this knockout is 100% top 3. And if you leave it out of your top 3, it makes absolutely 0 sense, because not only does it involve the style of the finish, but as you keep mentioning, it also involves the magnitude. Jorge Masvidal's flying knee against Ben Askren. It's got to be number 1 or number 2, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, flying knee within 3 seconds. This fight was hyped up. Ben Askren was talking loads of shit. People were looking forward to this fight to see how it was going to play out, to see how Ben Askren did against Jorge Masvidal. And Jorge Masvidal just runs at him and just flying knees him to the skull in 3 seconds. I mean, it had the time. It had the crazy, finishing style. And it birthed the star.
True.
It could be number 1. I got to give a different knockout number 1, but in my opinion, this probably, if you're factoring, again, magnitude and all these different factors in, it might be the greatest knockout of all time. And if you leave that off your list, I'm going to be disappointed.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say anything too soon, but my number 2 is what we just saw this past weekend. again, magnitude, the BMF title fight. This is a platform for you to just prove how bad of a motherfucker you are. That is what this belt was made for. And I feel like they've done a good job. And Dana was talking a lot about it in the press conference of the fighters that they choose to represent this belt have all been really, really great representatives of the belt. Like, I mean, Jorge Masvidal is one of the baddest MFers. Nate Diaz, same thing. I mean, they've constantly had these type of fighters. But Max Holloway, the style that he ended that fight in, and not to mention that he looked, honestly, probably the best he's ever looked in the past 4 or 5 years. He looked incredible at lightweight for the first time since the Poirier fight, actually filling out to the division. He looked incredible. And for him to do what he did, to risk it all like that against the hardest hitter in the division in a lot of people's eyes. Justin Gaethje's power is feared in that division. And Max Holloway, people were questioning his chin the entire lead up to the fight. He's never seen this type of power. I wasn't one of those people. If y'all watched the TikTok, y'all saw. But for him to risk it all in the final 10 seconds like that, point to the canvas, flash back to the Lamas fight, my goodness, dude. That was insane to see. And as a UFC fan, I don't think that moment, I mean, it was topped a little bit, but I mean, it was up there as one of the greatest moments in UFC history, undoubtedly. So it has to be top 2 for me.
I 100% think that it is probably going to go down as one of the greatest knockouts of all time. I can't put it at 1 or 2. I think that is a little bit of recency bias, but 100% makes my top 5. Let me get into what is my favorite UFC knockout of all time and what I think is the best. In my opinion, it's not close. It's Joaquin Buckley's knockout of Impa Kasanganay. The style of that jump back kick. It didn't matter the magnitude for me. I remember I was, thankfully enough, I was watching some random fight night in my room, probably the second or third prelim of the night, and I remember just sitting in my seat and just staring like this at the screen for 10 minutes until somebody walked into my room. I went to boarding school, for those that don't know, and I literally was like this at my screen for 10 minutes until one of my other buddies who lived right next to me ran into my room and was like, "Did you just fucking see that?" And that's where I cracked.
Yeah.
Bro, what Joaquin Buckley did to Impa Kasanganay with that spinning, we will never see something like that ever again in any sort of combat sport. I just, jumping, this, not only that, this guy's 5'9".
Yeah,
He's
man.
a welterweight.
It's crazy athleticism, man.
And he gets his kick caught mid-air jump back kick to it's the greatest UFC knockout of all time. It's the greatest MMA knockout of all time. It's the greatest combat sports knockout of all time. And in my opinion, it's not even close. And, you haven't listed either the Ben Askren knockout, the Edson knockout. What is your greatest knockout of all time?
My greatest knockout of all time.
I don't want to hear.
I know, bro, but get ready.
I know what you're
Leon
say.
Edwards knocking out Kamaru Usman in the 5th round to win the welterweight title. Let me tell you something.
Greatest knockout.
Let me tell you something.
I can get greatest comeback of all. Greatest knockout of all.
Because that's the part of it, though, for me.
I wish I had a drug test with me.
No, but listen.
What do you want? What do you want? No. Bless me with the dealer, though.
Bro, listen. What I'm saying is what makes it the greatest knockout of all time for me is the fact that it was also one of the greatest comebacks I've ever seen. Excuse me. One of the greatest comebacks I've ever freaking seen in any sport, in any context in my life. That fight, if you sat there and showed that to just a regular average person that was not a UFC fan and said, "Watch this fight and tell me what you think," through the first 4.5 rounds, they'd be like, "What the fuck did you just make me sit here for? What am I watching right now?" Complete and utter domination by Kamaru Usman. I was sitting there because I was rooting for Leon, and I'm like, dude, is he meant to be on is he like a fraud? What am I seeing? Because he didn't really look good at all. Like, he had that one takedown, but that's really all he did. He pulled that shit out of the fire and knocked him out clean when it looked like he was staring defeat right in the face, bro. Like, the call, by the way, John Anik's call, he said, that's not the cloth that Leon Edwards is cut from. That moment, as a UFC fan, I went the craziest I've ever went in my life, man. That just, it can't be topped for me personally. I know there's going to be people hating maybe in the comments. I know you disagree, but just the comeback story, the element of his coach sitting there telling him, "Come on, Rock, don't let him bully your son." And he comes out and just does that when you think that it is all but over. I mean, dude, it doesn't get better than that for me, but I know you disagree. Go ahead.
When it comes to my reaction of that finish, I can't even lie. And I'm actually going to put it up on the screen right now. Oh my God.
What? Oh my God. He knocked Usman out cold. Oh my God. Oh my God. Put him to sleep. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. That is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Oh my God. No way. There is no way.
I mean, yes, it had me freaking the fuck out, right? This also Leon Edwards was one of my favorite fighters at the same time. Seeing him get beat down for 4 rounds, thinking it was all over, and then seeing him head kick him into an oblivion was insane. But
Out cold,
bro. Ben Askren's knockout doesn't make you. I mean,
man.
Jorge's flying knee doesn't make your list. Edson Barboza's legendary spinning heel kick doesn't make your list.
I get it.
You put, oh my God, you put
I get
McGregor
it. But that, bro,
you put
that
Leon
was a clean ass head kick. Don't get me wrong. Like,
I'm not saying it wasn't a clean ass. Of course, it was a clean ass.
No,
head kick.
but I'm saying, man, like again, like I said in the beginning, the moment really matters, man, and that's why, like the other day, that moment.
How about the Jorge moment?
It was. I didn't even know who fucking Ben Askren was for real before that happened. Like, yeah, it was a crazy ass knockout, but I mean, like, and Masvidal's start took off. Don't get me wrong, but it ended so quick, and it was like, damn, like it was a crazy technique, but he fucking dove into that shit like a dumbass, just freaking like dived right at his knees. You know, I was like. Yeah, it was a crazy ass knockout. One of the craziest knockouts we've ever seen. Don't get me wrong, and it's on my honorable mentions. We'll get to that in a second, but. I don't know, man. Just the magnitude of what we just watched the other day. I'm talking about that Holloway Gaethje knockout, the BMF title fight for Max Holloway to literally embody a bad motherfucker in the dopest way possible in the last 10 seconds of the fight and throw down like that and knock him out cold. Like, that was just the coolest shit ever. And then the same thing with Leon. It was just... I mean, my face and my demeanor as that 5th round was playing out, I'm just literally dead, staring at it like, because my dad's a big Kamaru Usman fan too. He's hype as hell, and I was rooting for Leon in that fight. I'm like, what is this performance? And all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, puts him out cold. Dude, it just couldn't be topped. But I 100% see how anybody would not have that in their top 5. I get that.
Well, I don't think I can really change your mind. When it comes to some honorable mentions,
Yes,
what'd you
sir.
have?
Let me hear it.
What'd you have? Go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, I'll go first. So I did have Masvidal as my first honorable mention. That knockout, like I just said, one of the craziest we've ever seen. And again, if you factor in the technique, a flying knee, pinpoint accurate, put him out like a board. I mean, that shit was as clean as it gets. Not my number 2 on my honorable mention. You mentioned it earlier. Was in your top 5. And again, the spinning wheel kick. I think this guy might have the best spinning wheel kick I've ever seen, Edson Barboza, because the speed in which he's able to turn his head and turn his entire body to just whip his leg around like that, it is insane. And he put Terry Edom out cold. I mean, he was seeing demons like for a second. It was crazy. And then my last one, Anderson Silva, KOing Vitor Belfort. Again, one of the cleanest kicks I've ever seen, a front kick to the face. It was just the fact that he didn't even throw anything leading up to that strike. He literally just stared at him for 2 seconds, made him think, and then boom, out of nowhere, swings his leg up, knocks him out cold. I mean, that was just one of the coldest knockouts I've ever seen. And Anderson Silva in his prime, it doesn't really get too much better than that. So yeah, he had a lot of potential candidates for this list, to be honest. But that was the one that made my honorable mentions. How about you, bro? What was yours?
I mean, for me, Edwards Usman's got to be up there. What else? Dan Henderson, Michael Bisping's got to be over there.
Yeah.
Man, if we were to count Contender Series, that Ignacio Bahamondes front kick.
Man.
Oh my God, that was beautiful. And same with his spinning wheel kick.
Yeah,
Again,
I was just about to say.
I got to put. I think Edson had a better wheel kick than he did. Any others? Jiri's spinning back elbow, absolutely incredible.
That was so clean.
But
man.
I'm firm on my top 5. I think I had a good list, and I think you had a shit list. But that's my opinion, folks. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back with another video probably in about 2 days. So stay tuned, subscribe, like, and turn those notifications on so you can hear all of our thoughts on just random topics like this.
Exactly,
What's the greatest
man.
knockout of all time? It's Joaquin Buckley's spinning kick, and I'm
So he
dying
says.
with that. And he thinks it's Leon. All respect to him, folks. That's all we got for you today. It's been Lucas and Rohan. Adios.
Peace.